So today, let's start with attention. And where I would love to start is how do we define attention? What is attention? What it is not? When do we say somebody is being attentive? And I would love for you to get us started on that.
Attention is just a wonderful capacity that we have. And to take one of Daniel Goleman phrases, he says, we have to start to pay more attention to attention.
Mm-hmm.
Which is circular, but very true. Attention basically picks for us which part of our experience at any given moment is relevant, prioritized, signified or significant, and in which context do we operate.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting, because it's a capacity that is has to decide on the spot, and it's life management. I call it attention management, but actually where I'm going to bring my attention to come to bear on things, those things become the content of my consciousness, of my immediate experience, of where life goes at this particular moment. Immediately you can see how important that capacity is.
Mm-hmm.
So the last few decades, with books like Flow, with emotional intelligence, social intelligence, focus, researchers have brought more to the popular attention, awareness, how important those capacities are. So if we look at attention, it's pointing us in the direction of what is relevant. Hopefully we make good choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the case. And I would suggest a metaphor that I think will be extremely useful for us as we go along, because it's such a huge capacity, it's such a huge topic, easily to get lost. So better not. Let's try to keep it tight and to have a very core definition with what we started, and use the metaphor for it that now all of us, because of the digital world we live in, can very easily relate to. Mm-hmm. It's not one-to-one, but I would suggest it because it's very helpful. And this is the looking at attention as the operating system.
Mm-hmm.
If you like the word mind, if you feel attached to it, I find it a little bit tricky, but you can say that it's an operating system for the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, we immediately can ask the next question: who is the user of that operating system? And we are going to delve into this when we speak about perception. And for now we can say, I am the perceiver, which is another magical field of the human experience. But the operating system means that my attention is actually involved in everything that happens. Whether I'm aware of it, whether I lost it at the curve, down the line, whether I give it away, or whether I wish to reclaim it as part of my experience, attention is everywhere. And I suggest when people listen to this now, to consider the magic of attention is by the fact that it's everywhere, and it does a great job and stays out of the way. So it's very easy to overlook it. We've seen this already with embodiment. We live a body and we become blind to the body.
Yeah.
We are attentive to many things, whether we like it or not, or whether we manage it well or not. And we are not really aware of how attention runs around. And we are going to see the same thing with perception. So those three magical capacities are there. They are doing an amazing job for us to stay alive and to be well. They're very much deeply linked to our quality of life. And yet, they become transparent. Like a wonderful server that you don't notice it.
Yeah.
He or she or they just manage to do everything and disappear. So when we wish to get more aware of our attention, to pay more attention to attention, this is the task. Without becoming obsessive about it, but being curious, asking the question, how do I go about with my attention right now? What do I choose? Is it my choice? Now, nowadays with digital technology, or with films, or with books, and with the industry of advertisement, many of those choices are hijacked. So we are bombarded. We are going to look into this down the line with distractions. But also we are very easily tempted in our attention. Hey, look at this. Hey, look at that. Check this out. You know.
Yeah.
So, and these are wonderful things. It's completely fine. You go on YouTube and 5 hours later you see I forgot my life. I forgot this. I forgot that. I didn't eat. I didn't go to the loo. Whatever. So these are wonderful things that we can experience and learn a lot. And the question is, who is the driver? Who is the user? Who am I as a perceiver? Was it my choice? And we become more and more aware nowadays that with regards to nutrition, to intimacy, to relationships, to work, many things, the question is, hey, was it my choice?
Yeah.
Was I there? Erving Goffman, a psychologist or sociologist, he suggested to look at the lack of attention as if I'm not there. And he calls it a gesture of being away. One word that almost tells a tragedy of our civilization. You see people standing there, being there, and they're not there. So those are the topics we are dealing with attention. And it's a wonderful jungle to go into. And sometimes, again, like embodiment, it's a little bit scary at first because you realize that many times you're not there.
Yeah.
And yet, I really suggest to take this position, to drop into the driver's seat and to start to see, wow, I am actually an amazing human being. I have this capacity at my disposal, and I might just as well get used to working with it and own it, reclaim it. Down the line, we will see to master it. Not in a dominative way, but with a loving, friendly, caring way. When I invest in my resources, and attention is a resource already in flow, like 4 decades ago, Csikszentmihalyi described it as a resource, which is a very important statement. It's the original, it's the human resource we have. So I can start to come to own it and see how I want to manage it. And it's completely fine to master it gradually, to make a lot of mistakes on the way. We learn it a little bit like children. So I would suggest to look at it this way as the beginning, if this answers the question.
Yes, it does. And you already pointed out towards many things. And I think what I would repeat would be, you mentioned Daniel Goleman, and I also read quite a bit from him and did a few exercises that he suggests, as well as John Kabat-Zinn and many others. And my way was, in a way, what you described of coming to this realization that most of the time my mind is wandering. It is, in a way, there's no state where there's no attention. It's just that either it's consciously directed or just moving about. Pulled in different directions from different distractions or attention-grabbing notifications or activities or visuals. So it seems that there's this operating system that is always on. This is what makes life conscious. But what direction we put into it, whether we are away or present, is the key. And I think most of our listeners and viewers will know enough of it, so I wouldn't go too deep into it, but we know from research that the ability to manage your attention, or as mindfulness as it's popularized now, has physical and mental benefits. So that some simple concrete benefits are reason enough to pay attention to attention. And I guess to be curious about it, to really get to get a sense of all the shapes and flavors attention can take, and eventually we're going to get into details of when to use what. So let's get a bit more into it. The note I have here talks about attention space. Attention could be internal, it could be external. I could be focusing entirely on what I'm saying, words that I'm formulating, or how my body feels sitting in this chair. Or it could be external. I'm looking at you and I'm trying to, at the same time, making sure that you understand what I'm saying. Or if I'm out on the street, I'm paying attention to everything around. It can be very physical. If I'm doing my yoga nidra or learning a new exercise trick in my movement training, I can be very much focused on how my body is feeling in space, internally, or it could be on my mind. You know, I can't do a cartwheel yet, and suddenly my focus is entirely on, I suck at this, I'm not good enough, I'm not paying enough attention. So suddenly I'm very thought-oriented. So there can be body and mind, and then it can also be in the moment or not. And in the moment would be really in this moment as we are paying attention internally, externally, or if I'm thinking about the past or wondering about the future. So simulating the futures or reflecting on the past. Can we dive a bit deeper into this, because I'm sure this is not exhaustive at all. I didn't list down all the different senses and how they play into this.
You mentioned wonderful stuff and a lot of stuff. And it already shows us from the beginning that we live in infinity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you do when you realize that you live in infinity? And you are part of infinity, you are infinite, your attention can go in infinite ways. It's like you enter a supermarket, not just with milk and butter and bread, but of so many things that, of course, you can see why attention needs to select, to pick up, to signify, to
Mm-hmm.
point. And the path of life that we carve out for ourselves is very much the result of the choices of our attention and what we highlight, because it can go in any direction.
Yeah.
Because our discussion is a lot regarding embodiment perception. We might touch the body experience and attentive experience and perceptive experience, first of all within our closed circle. But it can go into anything, anyway, and it's completely fine. It's completely wonderful for us to go there. I would love this. It's just a lot of ground to cover, but it's a wonderful ground.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that you said before, which is extremely important to remember, is that attention is there all the time. So, it's not that we speak about lack or utter lack of it, but we actually speak about the quality, the intensity, the direction, and again, who is the boss? Who is the driver?
Yeah.
Who does it serve? It's like this Sauron with Lord of the Rings. Whom do you serve? So I would like my attention to serve my life in a sense that can nourish me, can help me grow, can help me deal with my surrounding, with my community, with people I love, things I care about. I wish it to somehow help me to make my choices. It's a bit like democracy with the government, but here we are the sovereign person, and we have to make our choices and be responsible for them, and they have consequences. It sounds a bit scary, but actually it's wonderful. Like, what would you like to eat for lunch?
Yeah.
How are we going to cook it without burning the house? And by being attentive, by being attentive. And so we are in this infinite space, and attention is constantly there. So we are going to happily rediscover that it's all the time there. And it's malleable. For instance, nowadays, again, with computers and with tech, the understanding that we are able to zoom in and to zoom out as a movement, it's one of the typical gestures and movements. I call them modes in my work, modes of attention. Now it's completely our everyday talk.
Yeah.
So cameras and so everything works with zoom in and zoom out. It makes completely sense. But I think 100 years ago it would not be so, because things were more static and we tended to think more in absolute values. And actually this movement was not so much in people's awareness. They use it all the time, but it's as if you have to have the right perspective to everything.
Yeah.
And not necessarily move the perspectives.
Yeah.
So attention is there and we move it constantly and we use it constantly. And this is how it's supposed to be. Now the painful part, the heartbreaking part, is that we cannot be attentive to everything all the time.
Right.
That's why when we get to perception, we will see that a certain salvation of the human condition is by broadening our perception. But attention is the selective one. Some people call it working memory, there are different terms, is a bit like a bottleneck, like what we spoke about the eye of needle last time. So it has to make very painful selections. It's a bit like you're going to get married. With how many people can you get married at the same time? Yeah. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But how do we manage our choices and know that when we go down that road, we are not at the same time at that road? And our choices define spaces, attentive spaces, where we can unfold and develop, knowing that it could have been otherwise, and to try to live in peace with this part of the human condition. It's important, because even when you teach people about attention, when you train with it, you start to see that you have to pick up something. And then something has to shift away from something else.
Yeah.
It's not an easy decision to make. Like some of us would like to be able to see everything all the time. Now, it's even worse, because when I work with people and I try to teach them how to pay attention, let's say, to a certain injury, and I need their participation in order to get better, they learn to shift attention to this place. And then they can come a session later in a week or two and say, look, I'm sorry, but I could not pay attention to it all the time. I tell them, of course you cannot. So we cannot pay attention to the entire universe all at once. And we cannot even pay attention to a certain part all the time.
Yeah.
We are conditioned in the human condition, the embodied human condition. We might speak about the attentive human condition. It's already molding the filters, the presets of our ability to experience. It still leaves us with an infinite possibility. It's gold, people. Go there, train this, develop this. It's going to change the entire movie of your life, because you are waking up in the middle, popcorn, Coke, whatever people need for the movie, and I'm there. I'm not falling asleep in the cinema.
Yeah.
There was this Paul Simon song, Wake Up Little Susie. These two teenies that fell asleep in the cinema. So this is the story of our lives, and we want to wake up. But part of the painful realization is that we cannot have it all at once. It's like you go to the ice cream store, you cannot buy the entire store. You're going to have a little ice cream. You have to make your choices. So it's definitely there. But once we wake up, it starts to be very interesting. And the choices are also wonderfully personal. It's incredible for me to realize how different people are. When you work with people, you also see this very, very tangibly, very concretely, like, wow, I would never go there.
Yeah.
And they happily do. They run. So it's really wonderful how unique we are. And it's completely okay. There's no right choice. There are just choices to be made. And when people get empowered and they can start to go their own way, it starts to really become their vehicle, their road. Down the line, it's their initiation. It's a bit like the same attention that you can use for meditation. It becomes something that carves out the rest of your life. So it's part of how you are unfolding as a perceptive being. It's beautiful. And it's actually already there. It's not even in your fingertips, like a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
It's your fingertips.
Yeah, it is
and it's
you.
your hand, and it's you, and it's now happening. And where do you go with your attention?
Yeah.
This is the thing. By the way, if I may allow a little joke, the last time when we spoke, you mentioned this thing with the theater.
Mm-hmm.
You remember about the text and the actors, and each one having their own, but sometimes it's not in sync.
Forgetting the tempo and forgetting when to enter and exit.
And then on the way home, I just remember a discussion I once had with people I was training about attention, and many people come from the actor business or from the show business, and I'm trying to use sometimes examples that fit for people. So I was telling them, if we consider this wonderful saying by Shakespeare that all the world's a stage, and then we have the normal text of the Shakespearean version, but I wanted to insert or interpolate another part that Shakespeare didn't say, that all the world's a stage and all the actors are asleep. And let's now continue the discussion. And once, and this is the amazing thing about attention, and it's already on the verge of perception, once I wake up and I start to govern my decisions, there is something there that wakes me up to the moment of how I choose. So consider what we said also last time about the body. It's the autopilot gradually becoming human. Or I, as a zombie, suddenly start to take back my life. This is what we are talking about. It's funny that nowadays we speak about self-awareness in computers and the systems and the AI and so on. When will those systems get self-awareness? And we sit there as humans and we are very proud. We are self-aware. And then the question is, how can we become self-aware? How can we rehumanize ourselves? And attention is one of those doors. It's very easy to access.
Thank you for that. That's it's a very empowering message as well. I think one could say in a flippant way, perhaps, to say, well, attention is always there, and you have a short life. So what's the big deal? Just get on with it. But I think there's no debate here in that the ability to choose. The ability to be able to direct your attention has huge implications for our lives, and it is about becoming more of ourselves and bringing all of ourselves to the situation, and then of course playing it out in our own unique way, in our own unique voice, with our own unique choice of words or dialogues. It's improv theater. And you're constantly kind of shifting between focused attention and being in flow. So that game is very important. I want to ask, how is your experience if you look at any typical day? You wake up in the morning till you go to bed and fall asleep at night. What kind of attentional spaces are you moving through, and what would be the significant ones, if you could just point a few where we could say, here's one where you could begin to pay more attention, and move a bit away from autopilot and kind of bring in conscious focus or attention to something. What's your experience?
Very, very interesting question, because it goes straight into how do you actually run about or run around with it. Joe Dispenza has a wonderful talk, a short one, very interesting one, about what happens when people wake up. And one of the things he says, and I think it's worth mentioning, and people can find it online, I guess, is that when your mind kicks in, we will soon go into what happens with perception there. It's very interesting. But when the mind kicks in as you wake up, it goes on autopilot to pick up the problems that you left open from yesterday. So actually you wake up yesterday.
Yeah.
So this groundhog movie experience.
Yeah.
And no wonder things don't change according to how you want it. Interesting, huh? So how can we, and this is the crazy bit, how can I, as a mind, be attentive to the autopilot when I wake up and trick myself into not playing the little Mimi that I know? This is amazing. Amy Winehouse has this song, I Cheated Myself. So usually the way we cheat ourselves is the opposite direction. But here we want to trick the autopilot, again, because it's a zombie that we are, in a nice way. Now, it's a sweet little zombie, a little bit zombie. How can I trick the zombie to wake up? How can I do it in a nice way, not in the Zen, there is this big stick that you wake up from meditation when you fall asleep. It doesn't have to be with a jolt, but it can be soft and smart and sneaky. Yeah? And this is very interesting. What happens when we wake up, whether it's from a dream or from calm sleep, is that the world starts again to be more clearly divided. What I call also in the project we are working on, the perceiver and the perceived. It starts to become more clear, now I am the little me, and I can perceive the world around me, and I'm back in the game. To be back in the game, many people start to pack the suitcase from yesterday, or to unpack. If we don't go there, we have a very interesting choice. But here again, it's almost like a spiritual riddle. How do I wake up before my mind?
Yeah.
How do I become aware of my awareness? And here, thanks to everything, we have the body. And we can have a little bit of a sneaky bastard, a strain in us that can help us to change that. So usually when we wake up, we would go to the mind and start to pick up words, concept, themes, topics, tasks, relationships, anger, the entire panoply, the theater, the decoration of my life, which most people are not super happy about, but it's just there. And we all know this. When I wake up and I'm able to sneak back to my body, for instance, do any movement, it can even be wiggle your toes. If you remember this Tarantino Kill Bill, when she wiggles her toes after so many months in coma. How we can get back to life. Now, I can wiggle my toes as if it's toes. And I can wiggle this as, this is me. This is my body. And this is the furthest away I can be now from my mind.
Yeah.
So I know the old grandmother in my spirit that starts, and I go to my toes. This is, by the way, choices of attention.
Yeah.
Attention is a bit like a street fight, a martial artist. And it's able to sneak. To go, somebody comes at you, you go low, you hit them below, you go up.
Yeah.
We are entitled. It's us. It's ours. We can do this. So one thing I can do is just to go into the body, choose a place, use my breathing as a bridge. We spoke about it in the end of the last talk. Use my eyes to sneak a little bit away from my mind, change position into a funny position that usually I don't take. Do something that allows me an opening. Think of it a bit like what nowadays we are using a lot as a cliche, the wave function of a quantum. And instead of getting it solid and letting it collapse onto a solid reality, which is basically the suitcase from yesterday, oh, I forgot this, oh, I need this. I allow the body and the attention to create a fluffy experience that is less solid and soften it up. and I'm doing something that can be embodiment, can be attention management, a little trick, broaden horizon instead of shrinking it. I can play around, almost like a director of a film with the camera, but I'm just doing it innerly in order to avoid the trap. Because as you wake up, the mind, the past is waiting for you. It's a bit like a fisherman.
Yeah.
You have the fishing rod there with the hook, and you just woke up. Gotcha. And then nowadays we have the phone and we have the news or the Facebook. So we have the tech that helps us even more to be hooked. And then we are Tristan Harris, a very interesting person, ex-Google tech person, says that it's so bad, it's almost like being jacked in to the system from the morning you wake up. So it's a little bit Matrix-like thing. But again, we can use the body and attention to circumnavigate the globe from a different direction. And it's very interesting, and it can be very simple exercises. Exercise is a bad word, but playful little things. And it can be also with changing routines, like not doing the same thing again. So little things like this allow you to open it up. And without being harsh with ourselves, we know down the line we will check the phone. Down the line the finger will go to the coffee machine, and down the line there will be, I forgot to call, It's completely fine. But we can try to have a smooth landing and to start to see how do we go back into our lives. And remember, even with anger, it's our life. We can decorate this differently.
Yeah.
We can design it differently. And we are the designer, we are the design. These toes are yours. So this attention is you. So why not, This could be an amazing thing. Now, in my case, I know, for instance, when the day starts like this and I have a few moments, I know that it's going to determine how my morning will be and the quality of it. If it's going to be a calm day and I can be concentrated, or I'm already in a crash landing mode.
Yeah.
The dog is there, the child is there, family is there, breakfast is here, and I forgot this, forgot that. And then we start with a crash landing and we just run until we have a breather, maybe in an hour, that we can come back to our senses again. So life is full of those things, and we are able to see, okay, how would I like to design it differently? And we shouldn't also be, as I said, harsh, but also not demanding. And now everything has to be like this, and now I have to do it every morning like that, and easy. Like, one of the things that we have to have is a good nose, because we are going to crash on this nose many times. And the question is, how do we get up again and try again? This is what is carving out, not successes, but the ability to deal with failure or little failures and to come back on track of what is important for us. That's a big one. And many times we can do it with humor. Humor is extremely important. And I had once, for instance, my old teacher was recommending me during a crisis in my life, in the morning when you get up, if you have to put your socks on, put just one sock and walk around just with one sock. You cannot take yourself seriously with one sock. You just feel so stupid. So little tricks like this can help us, and it can be done in a humorous way. It doesn't have to be kind of New Year resolution.
Yeah.
That now I'm going to start every morning with. People are really, it's a bit like a sergeant, having a sergeant on your neck, telling you what to do. And then it becomes a little bit like a hard management, and it's bound to fail because it's no fun.
Yeah.
It can be done in a smart way. One of the things I was hoping to do down the line is to do something for people to wake up in a nicer way. And how can you do this without too much video, but more kind of guidance to just see how you can trick the trickster, hunt the hunter, that you unhook the fisherman that comes to hook you. And if people like this, it's a wonderful motivation, because actually behind this, we speak about emancipation and we speak about freedom. Now, the crazy thing, we are still very much speaking about human rights as a freedom and government intervention as freedom and political freedom and gender freedom. And there is a lot of issues with freedom that are social, which is extremely important, of course. But here we are speaking about a slightly different freedom, and this is the bizarre thing. I'm not anymore a victim or an oppressor. I become a target for myself, and I want to become free of me. In Yiddish you say nudnik. It's like I have a little nagging, it's usually like an old person. My mind has a little bit of this, so I know that I have a nudnik in my mind. How can I break free from myself? The funny thing is to become myself, or to re-become myself, or broaden myself to the larger person that I am. And it's wonderful. It doesn't have to be depressive and hard and success-oriented, and everybody has to do the same, and now there is a magazine of how you should wake up. And Quatsch.
Fascinating. There's a lot there, but I really like also the metaphor you earlier brought in. There is this operating system, the computer is on, and it seems that quite often
we are online.
We are online.
Also when we are offline.
Indeed.
Yes.
There's data streaming in, and if I were to continue using the laptop or computer metaphor, we can get used to one or two applications that are always on and forgetting all the other things that our computer can do. And then my web browser usually has tons of tabs open, and sometimes it starts to slow down and it annoys me. But I could also open a different browser and distribute some of those tasks in different places. Or instead of reading an article, most laptops have the capability, I could let it speak and shift my attention from seeing to listening the same content, or putting on one sock while doing that, or not holding my coffee mug in my right hand but doing it with my left hand, or brushing my teeth with the left hand. So it seems the way to kind of open up possibilities is to start exploring a bit, be a bit more, start being creative and curious, not necessarily in terms of visible outward aesthetics, but being creative and curious about how our mind works, where our attention goes, and how does it feel to introduce something new that is not the same old pattern. Kind of instead of picking up yesterday's suitcase for a moment, looking at it, taking a walk around it, and then seeing if we want to go have coffee before we pick it up. So talking about this curiosity and creativity and balancing between repeating the same pattern versus getting an overview or focusing on different aspects of that, which seems liberating. I want to bring in Jacob. You can tell as much as you want about Jacob. Jacob is lovely. He's 6 years now.
No, 7.
Now 7.
Yeah.
Now you have had the privilege of being Jacob's father and seeing him grow. You have also had the privilege of working with many, many, many clients over the years, as well as doing your own training. What what kind of applications do you see? You know, when a child starts off, in a way, they're learning to build their filters, right? They're learning different patterns. They seem to be naturally curious and creative. And as we get older, me as a 40-year-old coming to your to a session with you and sitting there and repeating for half an hour my troubles with work, where perhaps the only trouble is that I haven't said to my boss what I wanted to say yesterday or 2 weeks ago. And forgetting about everything else, forgetting about the rest of this way, focusing in on this one particle and allowing it to drag me all over the place. Can we talk a bit more about this creativity and curiosity, and how do you see it developing? Where do we lose it? What happens?
There's so many funny incidents to think of. Yeah. So if again we go into the essence, and maybe we can use, it's good to use a child's example for this. As adults, a lot of the doors have already been shut. So it's a bit like we are running through a corridor that we already know, and we're not going to check this one. We're not going to check this one. No, go there. We are under stress, time. No. Maybe we check this window. Okay, but run. So we are already in a tunnel vision. We spoke a little bit about traumatic experiences, body, mind, and so on. Much of what we do already goes through the motions as if a lot of the options are closed. And many times we don't have the leisure and the creativity, and we don't have the space to really check them because there is just too much to do. There is a lot of stress. So this champagne goes through the bottleneck. Under pressure, there is no other way. And so when people come and we start to open some doors, and open them partially and see that it uses their path. It helps them to use it for their path. And it brings them healing. They start to check certain doors, for instance, how I hold my painful shoulder, and a person can learn to use different movements or different procedures, different routines. This is the place where the adult will have to start to dare. It's not so easy sometimes to dare to open doors, open windows in a place that used to be a bit like a bunker that you have to run through. A child comes from the other direction. A child and people that are a little bit limited in their cognitive capacity. I grew up with many brain damaged and handicapped children. My brother was handicapped. So these people come from the other end. It's a bit like children, but they stay very young. They have all the doors blown open. I remember one example. It's such an interesting one. I was fascinated, and I think my wife was a bit angry. I tried to teach Jacob to use the mop for the shower. And he really learned it very well. He just did it the other way. Instead of bringing the water towards the shower, he started to push it the other way into the corridor because he found it much more interesting. So he learned the practice, but he did it in the wrong way. Wrong way concerning
According to us.
Yeah. Those little things, you see that the children actually have a lot of learning to do, and they're very eager to do it. On endless levels, to become a little mensch, to become a little person, and to do it properly. And you can see that they make those as if funny mistakes or errors according to our bunker, to our corridor, because they don't understand the purpose of it. This is just the way it is. And this is what the grown-ups are doing, so it must be a good idea. Now we look at it and we say, oi, poor thing. But it's part of their learning to become a human being, according to our definitions. And it's part of our learning to learn to undo some of our human programming.
Right.
So they have to go slightly through, and it's said sometimes, slightly through the conditioning. And we have to go slightly through the deconditioning. Now, the interesting thing is that they learn to become a mensch and to grow up. And we learn to become younger. So in a way, And maybe also, it's also the benefit to be a very old father, as I am, that I can already see some of the silliness, to put it mildly, of the human condition and how we teach children how to be, and how we lock them into their game. And this is important. This is how you do it, and so on. And to look at it with humor and sometimes also with challenge, and also to try to make it funny and not the only way, the only truth, the only real, and so on. And we come from the other end, trying to make our world a little bit fluffier, more mysterious, to open doors, to see the wonder in things. So we have to open, as an old person or mature person, adult person, hopefully, we have to open younger eyes by this creative view, as the children have to learn our world in order to function in this world. Like, why on earth do you have to stand when the traffic light turns red? What is the connection? I like red. Jacob likes red. Finally, I have my color.
Now it's time to dance.
Yeah! No, it's not allowed, or this is dangerous, or we start to have a very complex learning. Now, for the adult person, you have a chance with the child also to see how crazy those complexities are, because suddenly you see it with fresh eyes, because you have to explain it to somebody young. And for the child, they are facing a very weird world that they have to catch up. And I remember myself, by the way, in this age, more or less in first grade, and so when we learned to read, and I had this question, why does this letter has this sound? Hello? There is absolutely no connection. Now, look at this, it's amazing. On the perceptive level, this is mind-blowing. But we have to associate certain alphabetic symbols or numbers. He learns music, so it's also notes. It's a lot of symbols that we learn to associate, that this symbol goes with this input. This association has been with us. We think of human learning and attentive learning in the last 300 years, more or less. But it's called the association of ideas. So this sensation goes with this name for this purpose, and click, 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 and I have a little, it's a bit like a bracelet. This is how it works. This is what children need to learn. This is a very basic level of learning. Let's take it a step deeper. An adult person, that becomes aware of her, his, theirs ring or a chain or association conditioning. When you become aware of this, you have also the choice to start to play around with the conditioning. And then you do something that the children have a kind of more of an affinity with, because they can have more imagination and it's very fluid. But you do it as an adult. I hope you can follow it. It's okay to follow. And then we come into genius learning, because then the child has to learn to make this chain of association. An adult person already has the chain of association. You can say, I learned this, but I got stuck there. Can I now take this chain and start to fluff it about, give it a jolt, jerk it around, twist the thing, and then suddenly this association is not so deeply conditioned. Then you become childlike, but then you take human learning to the next level. And this is what attention can help us to do. It's not just about learning to acquire knowledge, it's learning to undo the conditioning of that knowledge itself. This is what happens in revolutions of science, for instance, that we suddenly see that time and space are not fixed. We can play around with them. Nobody could think about this before. You need a crazy person, sort of, to bring those things around.
Yeah.
Okay, or Picasso that can suddenly break the human face to all kinds of different perspectives and bring them into a two-dimensional space. Crazy. It's absolutely not correct. It's not real. It's not, but it's artistic in a creative way. But you have to think, how can I look at the face from all these kind of different perspectives? Those things attention allows us to do. So on the one hand, it allows us to associate. It's almost like building a molecule. Red means ta-ta-ta, or this letter means zzz.
Yeah.
This is what children are struggling to cope with. And they learn very complex code. Once you learn it as an adult, you might decide this is the end of the road, I just want to stay with what I know. But if you do wish to evolve, some of the things, some of the doors of this corridor has to start to be oiled.
Yeah.
The hinges have to be renewed. You start to open them. And then suddenly you start to see a very different world. And the association starts to break down. In my personal life, I do it constantly. Some people think I'm a little crazy. But I like, for instance, to invent names for people, for myself or things, to play around with words. Because we are so linguistically oriented and a lot of our cognitive part of the brain and our everyday life is a lot about the coding of the right words. And especially I speak 4 languages, so I enjoy very much, but screwing around with them. So you can take a little bit of French, a little bit of Hebrew, a little bit of German, a little bit of English. You shake it, you make a cocktail, and you send it to a friend by SMS. It's a creative form of humor, bringing in from the cold all these crazy things that usually we just don't do because we have to say now something very short in an SMS. This is the place where you can bring creativity back. And it's not even a product. It doesn't have to be a successful thing. It doesn't have to be something that you sell. It's something that enriches your life.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, some of the biggest comedians are not funny at home. They are hilarious on stage. But at home they are depressive, aggressive, sometimes dull. It's very interesting. I would expect that somebody that is funny will be always funny, or at least also at home, because this is where it counts. And apparently it's not so easily to do. It's not so easy to do, and for many people it's not the case. And it's one thing to do it, and it's another thing to be it. Now, how do we bring this little creativity in our everyday life? And I'm also wondering about the children. A lot of the toys are already so structured. It's like you learn to work with those Legos or different parts, or the puzzles. It's already fixed. So, okay, you can learn how to get the fixed better fixed. But you can also try to do it differently. And we try to do it a lot together as a game. I hope he will not just see me down the line as a crazy papa, but but something that is useful for the ability to learn to do things in a different way. To tell jokes in a different way and to see. And again, beyond the humor and beyond achieving certain things, it's really important to understand it's as if we bring richness into experience, we bring infinity in. It's like you open the window and there is fresh air. It doesn't have to be the right air. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful air. It doesn't have to be the most dramatic air. Just fresh air. And it's for now. It's for the next breath. And we just play around with it. Those things are bringing little waking up moments. And attention is very good in doing this. And because attention is so focused, the body is a bit larger and perception is infinite. Because attention is so focused, the way that you are cracking a little nut makes a big difference. Because it's already
part of the bigger machinery that can create butterfly effects. That's beautifully said. I want to give it a moment to not take people's attention away from what you said. But it sounds as if a child is coming from quantum physics and learning Newtonian physics. And as adults, we got so used to the Newtonian that we do have to kind of do something, get the support, do the right practices, find ways to take different perspectives and and zoom in and zoom out and see that there is a whole world of possibilities that is free, that is always there, that all it needs is the intention and a bit of the right set and setting to kickstart that process. And what I remember also, many years ago, I used to be much more of a fussy eater. I still am. I have my preferences for food. But life was limited. It was 3 restaurants that I knew and 4 dishes within those restaurants that I wanted. I didn't want it any different. I didn't want the chefs to be to get too creative. I want my rice with tofu, and I want it as I had it last time. And because I wasn't able to take in other flavors. Or if you're living at on a street and you have your way to work, if you're always taking the same path, that's all you see. And I also remember there were times I used to drive to work to Mitte, and there's obviously this favorite path, but there are multiple paths that I didn't take.
Wow.
And it took a while for me to realize, actually I could incorporate this as a attentional practice, this little bit of newness, taking a different path. Maybe it doesn't even take more time, or maybe it even takes less time to get there, but you discover new restaurants, you discover new views, you discover new people. And it does enrich your experience, and it
Absolutely
opens up something. So we already went into attention and learning.
It's so beautiful what you say. By the way, one of the things that people can also try for themselves, and it's super easy because we have to go through certain streets or certain trails again and again and again. Ask yourself, what are you looking at while you walk down the street? Because basically you just have to see the sidewalk and to try to walk in a straight line. But what you're looking at many times defines how you're going to interact. And again, perception is interactive with your surroundings. Now, usually we look at people and we might ask ourselves why. Since we have a little dog, I started to notice that many people have dogs. And I started to be interested in the dogs. It was interesting because before, we don't really see them. And we can see other things in the street, signs and buildings. If people are having a specific inclination and tendency, they might see structure, architecture, and things in the street that I would never realize because I don't have the eyes for it. I carve my path in a different way, but it's the same world, it's the same infinity. It's just my interface. So if I want to play with the interface, I can start to look at different things. For instance, one of the weird things is to look at the spaces of in-betweens. Now, the spaces of in-betweens allow our eyes and our vision and our experience to suddenly not notice the objects, but to notice the space between them. Now, the space you can say is empty, it's full of air, but it's empty or transparent. But if you look at the in-between, you're knocked out of your normal interface default. So you can look between the trees, you can see the distance between the tree and the house, you can look at the places between the cars. There's all kinds of in-betweens, and when you walk this way, you suddenly feel that you're walking in a different street. Just as an example. Another thing that I saw a lot is staircases and elevators. It's a bit like dead places for people's attention because we just try to get to the other side. But if we start to notice the staircase or the elevator, the space becomes interesting again. And it doesn't have to have a specific purpose other than just being aware, just noticing the space that you are now in. So usually we are very much busy with people or with living things, and if we start to observe others, it suddenly becomes a very, very interesting experience. Of course, it doesn't have to be only walking in the street or staircases, but this can be taken anywhere.
Yeah, and you discover a lot of beauty, different beauty than our normal used to looking for or looking at people or things that attract us. If you're an architect, perhaps you'd be much more interested in the facade and the murals and the distribution of space.
I have some friends that they can detect, I would call it junk, but they can detect all the stuff people throw and what is interesting to pick up.
Wow.
And they're experts in this. I would always walk around this. I would not even look.
Yeah.
But it's wow. And I started, and it's very interesting. Like, what do people throw away?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's as if everywhere you look there is the universe. Yes, and it invites you to take a part. Now, when you are really busy with running to the bus, don't look between the trees because you might be run over by a car. This is also part of how attention has to have certain management for everyday life, and certain place where you can go idle and you can start to go into a free flow.
Yeah.
And not necessarily purpose-oriented. This is also part of this creativity.
Two examples come to my mind. Berlin has this very nice outdoors culture, and we have a little bit of forest around Berlin, but a lot of greenery and parks within the city. And one of the experiences that fascinates me sometimes when you're lying in the grass in a park under a tree, and you're just looking up. And you see this tree and the light streaming through, which is not part of a normal experience. There's not much to do there. Maybe there are some clouds in the sky or one or two birds, not there all the time. It's a kind of little experience of timelessness that streams through, and it feels good. I think that's enough of a purpose to experience that. And finally, the other image that comes to my mind is we're sitting in this living room, and it's set up a certain way. So here we can stand up and we can walk around this table, or over there we could sit on the sofas. But that corner is not accessible to us because of the way it's set up, and so that perspective is not accessible to us. Or TV is always here, and luckily we have windows so we can look out. But depending on how you set up your environment, you create patterns. And children are a great example of that, where they break those patterns. Children, if they can sneak under the sofa, you would find them often enough under the sofa, looking at the underside of the sofa, and you wonder what the hell is going on with this kid. Or putting different elements together, getting on top of tables, and in a way they, as you say, they come from the different side of it. They come from the side of possibilities, learning as they go what is the norm, what is the usual, what is expected. And we as adults, in a way, we become hostage to these convenience functions that we have created, which end up blocking off certain spaces. And this is a great segue to, it seems as if you're ahead of me on my notes already, because this is where I wanted to go with what you started saying about this narrow focus and open attention, and this interplay between them. You kind of are training but experiencing at the same time, and the practice of allowing for that experience to become enriching without being in the training space all the time. You can't be in the dojo all the time. You do have to get out. Outside can also be a dojo. But there's this interplay between focusing, zooming in, zooming out. Let's talk a bit about that. How does that...
Brilliant. It's almost like a dream state, or daydream state, or idle mind, compared to being on task. And it goes back to the question of the operating system, because both of these are part of the softwares that we have. And the question of who is the driver and for which purpose. We know it, by the way, in the history of discoveries, scientific and so, that many discoveries were actually done by struggling to find solution, giving up, going idle,
and seeing the solution in
and
the
suddenly
dream.
boom. Yeah, like the molecule of benzene was discovered in the dream, and Archimedes with his Eureka, the story with the different weights of substances and how we can calculate if things have an aggregation of metals or it's pure gold and so on. So it also has a purpose, but the way that the discovery was done was not just struggling to focus. It's a balance, and this is the important thing. It's a balance between being able to focus and let go. Focus and let go. Struggle to do the next step or to broaden it up. It's not even zoom in and zoom out. It's a little bit bigger because you don't just zoom out looking at the same thing from a distance. You are taking your attention away. And here it starts to touch the real thing. Another essence of attention is the ability to shift and to create transitions. Every time we go through a change, even if we're not aware of it, there is something in transition. Like today when I came in, we said hello and we met, and I was doing a transition coming from a public space outside into a private space here. This is a transition. I can do it with attention or without attention. And here comes the magic. If I am taking a transition or a change, and I bring my awareness to bear on it, and I want to participate in this process fully, to benefit from it, and to be fully present, my perception, embodiment, and attention allow the change to become not just a transition, but to become a personal transformation, which means that I use the change as a leap. It's a bit like a surfer. I don't know anything about surfing, but a bit like a surfer taking the wave in the right moment. So there is a transition. The wave is going to be there. The ocean is there. But I learn how to work with this wave. And as I teach people attention management, many times we learn how to ride those little ripples in life where changes happen. And you learn how to do a little thing and catch the wave. And the energy of the new experience creates this transition into a transformation when you use your attention to ride that wave. So beginnings, for instance, have a lot of power. Something starts, we are excited. Then there is a plateau after about 20 minutes. Teachers know it, by the way. They know how to give a lesson and to teach in the beginning. Usually the important stuff has to be on the spot in the beginning because people are excited, people are awake, and then it slumps. And then we finish an activity, and there is something at the end of this activity. We go into a transition of leaving the space, saying bye-bye, going home. But we can do it with attention, and then this transition becomes something that we can say completion. And I walk away fully awake to what stopped. This is absolutely essential, and it's exactly the places where we don't pay attention. We stumble into the train, we go home after school, whatever it is, and we already went into the corridor. And if we learn to open those windows, and this is part of what I wanted to teach children in schools, how they can learn to manage their attention at the moment when they start. It's a bit like waking up in the morning, waking up to a task that I'm now doing, and how I can close it, complete it, and let it go. Then my attention becomes calibrated. I have those optimal experience, not just high performance, but between performances. And then for a certain moment, my attention, my perception calms, my embodiment is there. All three foundation of my experience allow me to become one, and I move on. Now, if we learn to work with those things, our attention can hook our perception and our embodiment in a very, very important way and allow us to be well managed, not now as somebody who is a service provider, but as the owner of the experience. So I want to be in the beginning, fully there. I want to be in the end, fully there. Hopefully in between also. And then I can learn how to calibrate with my attention those moments of beginnings and ends. And they are determining a lot of what is happening in between. So this is extremely powerful, and it becomes a practice that you can take. Unfortunately, it was not picked up yet. I hope down the line it will be. It can also help people in their professional life, in their home office and so on, to learn how do I move from activity to activity and how attention can help me do it. So attention has this ability to shift focus. The landscape where it happens can be very broad and very complex, and this is part of where perception is needed. But attention as the lens, or as the beam of light, or as the lamp, highlights the experiences that I choose to focus on, and I can also kind of redirect it. This is the part of the power of this operating system.
Yeah.
Now, when I want to be creative, I sometimes have to fluff a little bit out. I can be technically creative, like working on a passage on a piano or trying to draw, and I know how to do it, and I'm trying to get better and better and better and better in the know-how. This is a little bit more technical. It's a bit like a craftsman that brings the mastery of the act into fruition and into perfection of something that you know exactly how it's supposed to be, and this is your horizon. Creatively, we bring the unknown into the known, and we look at the known as an unknown. There it's not so technical, it's more your being. Csikszentmihalyi in Flow says that it's not just about knowing the know-how, it's about going through the act. So you can go as a craftsman to get your act perfect, whatever perfect means. I'm a little bit suspicious with this term. Or you can play creatively in a way to tickle infinity to come. Like, I can do it differently. I can play around with this. And sometimes it's total failure. I'm trying to cook, sometimes think things I don't know how to cook. And I don't have any innocent victims to join me, so I'm trying to eat it myself. But I'm trying to learn to come out of my shell. And we don't need a lot of time for it, but a little bit of attention to decide, maybe today I will try to do this pancake or whatever.
Yeah.
And try to broaden up my possibilities. And here we come just a little point on something that I find extremely important about human learning. We have a very old school concept of knowledge. Knowledge is produced by very, very, very talented people at the very, very top of the helm of the pyramid of a certain institution, and it trickles down the line. This is extreme. This is Egyptian knowledge. This image of the pyramid. What we are dealing with is that when we start as a person, as people, to own and reclaim our experience, we are not sitting on a pyramid. And we don't have to produce it for somebody else. And it doesn't have to be institutionalized. It is your step today. So to give you a crazy example, and I'm saying it in a vulnerable state, I'm very fragile about this. I am not very tech-oriented compared to many of my friends. So I learned to use an app that I haven't been able to use before I got stuck in the installation. So I tried to go through the motions, I got stuck. Today I managed to achieve the big step that for other people might look completely silly, stupid, and self-evident. For me, it's a breakthrough. That I'm able to use something that I was not able to use before.
Yeah.
This is not the knowledge of the pyramid of now creating the next spaceship that will fly God knows where. But it's my little journey, and I am the hero of my little journey, and today I had a triumph. I was able to order my ticket online for the bus. Now, I'm taking this on purpose because you can have a lot of capacities, but you can be in certain things utterly limited.
Yeah.
Now, when you make this step, I had a triumph. Now, it's not just subjectively me. It's a sense of empowerment that I can now bring to the world and I can share with others. This is the place where knowledge is not the only thing that is important, but the knower. So if you imagine now a crazy thought experiment, we have something like 9 billion of us. Not all of them are creating the next supersonic whatever. But if each one of us, with attention, with embodiment, with perception, with regard to themselves, is able to take a little step, that's a triumph.
Yeah.
Now, this collective knowledge of the collective knowers, not the abstract knowledge in some tech institution somewhere, but the collective human ability to know is an experience. It's embodied, it's perceptive, it's attentive. There is the tech part of it, but it happens in the soul and hearts and beings of humans. If my little boy, he learns the trumpet, we are learning different notes, and he sometimes takes very difficult songs to play. I was like, whoa, okay, let's try. And we play together on the piano, on the trumpet, and so on. When we manage, it's a huge human triumph. And the state of knowing is what the knowers share. It's not necessarily what lays in a book somewhere. This experience allows me to be on the hero's journey of trying to make my little steps to get better. And I work with people with fractures, people with trauma, people that have certain limitations, people that want to break free from certain things. It doesn't have to be necessarily bad. And they make little steps. And it's a bit like a tango. Sometimes you fall back, sometimes you go forward, sometimes you have good times, bad times, like the song goes. This is where the real deal is carved out. And this is actually what really means to learn as humans. And those little steps are not so little.
Yeah.
And they create ripples around them. And you start to feel, wow, actually I can do this. And then maybe tomorrow I can manage another app if I need to. People can learn another formula. They can go into another math level or another computer game that they want to achieve, or being able to talk to a person they really love and they wanted to share with them something. Like, we are constantly against the barrier reef of our own protections, and we try to make those little doors, little windows, or sneakaways that we can manage to break through. And those are extremely important moments, because down the line, in the perception of it, those are breakthroughs. And if we consider the universe as a learning organism, that we are little cells within, or the planet as a learning organism and we are cells within, those little movements are part of the evolution of the entire thing. Okay, so the Akasha Chronic, let's say, if we want to use the Oriental or the Asian version of it, somewhere down the line we'll have a little note that Eylam learned how to activate an app today. So I do it on purpose, in a funny way, but those things, compared to infinity, to be able to make an exam or to make yourself a cup of coffee, I don't know if there would be a huge difference between them. In the end, it's part of this infinite thing. And it's encouraging us to take this position and not be also defeated by the fact that it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
And it's not only about success. You fell on your nose, stand up again, walk a bit like children. They fell on their asses all the time, when they learn to walk. And then as adults, we are much more cautious, sometimes too cautious. How do we balance the adventure This is the stuff we are dealing with. And a lot of the creativity waits for us when we go into this free flow. And dare to just go out. I see it a lot in sessions, by the way. People learn to work with their faces and with their eyes, with their hearing, and they shift attention from the normal cone. Our attention very much works like a vector. It has power in a certain direction. So they know it and it has already the inertia. It goes there by habit. And they learn to tilt. Let's say they learn to suddenly listen or to let go of the eyes, and the brain goes on Freilauf, you call it with a bicycle. You know, and I can train them, teach them, work with them, touch, guide, and then I let them rest. When I come back, it happens quite a lot. When people learn to do this, they come and say, wow, I have so many creative new ideas about what I can do.
Yeah.
And this is the place, by the way, that also beside the bed, when you wake up, you might have a little note, something to write. And just tick, 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 and put it away. You don't have to be busy with this in the middle of the night. But suddenly there is creative ideas coming just by letting go of this. This is how it's supposed to be. And it's not idle, as we might think. You're not just wasting your time. You are listening. You are opening up. And many times in the spaces in between listening and thinking and having a question, suddenly there is an input coming. This is the place where it connects between the free flow and the task could be that you are dealing with. And it's completely fine to learn to move between them.
Yeah.
By pushing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will help. Sometimes it's the opposite way. So, and this is part of the art that people can learn to use. So I hope it answers the question that it's a very, very interesting jungle of possibilities that we open. It doesn't have to be milked immediately to produce something of how things are supposed to be. But it's first of all starts as a human resource and management of human resource to venture out and to be able to see things differently.
Perfect. I think that's as good as a summary as we can get to for today. For me, this conversation has been very empowering in that sense. That there's a world of possibilities out there that we get to reclaim for ourselves, and it doesn't require force, it doesn't require major things either. It can start with very simple experiments because it is self-discovery in a way. And attention, it's like the flashlight that for most of the time it's on, but it's dangling by our belt, and we can start just picking it up and pointing it in different places to bring the rest of the universe or immediate universe into view and let it flow from there. Would you have any last words for our audience?
One thing that we didn't cover, but it might be a talk on its own, is that attention is embodied. Attention is not a cognitive skill. So I would suggest people to have a question. Because we use the word mind a lot, it's really a cool word, but many times it's a bit vague with what do we mean by it. It's a huge problem, philosophical problem. What do we mean by mind? But attention is something that animals have. Cats pay attention, dogs pay attention. So it's a non-cognitive feature of our perception, and it's embodied, which means that we can use attention with embodiment together, for instance, for the purpose of healing. We are going to look down the line at this as well. And that's why I think attention is also a very easily accessible and a friendly bridge between what we can use as the mind, as my inner voice or inner dialogue, inner monologue, and how I can start to learn to direct it and redirect it. So it opens a huge subject, but I think it's very important to have. And also for people to feel when I have a genuine question and I'm really curious about something, what happens in my attention when I ask the question? This is something you see a lot with children. Again, back to children. When they ask a question, it's not even verbal. You see a child or a baby or toddler that are not yet even speaking, but they ask a question with their entire being. Like usually it's a very open gesture of the body, but it's not like us doing a gesture. It's a bit like kind of a stunning, curious, open gesture of what is that? And they're fully there. Every finger is there, but it's not verbal, it's not cognitive, they're just open. Now, to learn this gesture when you are dealing with physics or with finances or with complicated relationship, and to learn to open this way is something that attention allows you to ask a question. It's not just focusing, it's very diverse, including this option of, wow, what's going on here? And I think it's really an inviting quality that doesn't have to be downloaded, bought, produced, pumped. It's already there, like you said. It's there in such a variety of possibilities. It's a bit like an evolution wonder that we can really learn to play with. And playing is usually the best way to learn anything. So, yeah, I hope it's useful and it brings this magical quality to each one of us listening or thinking about this, and it's endless, and it's completely fine that it's endless. We don't have to think that we have to have an Endstation, they call it, like a terminus. You don't have to go to the end station in order to reach your destination. In the middle of infinity, it's just about the ride in one way or another. So I think also with attention, it's to take it easy with it, enjoy it, cultivate it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so coming back to what we said earlier, for now, this episode ends at this moment. It's been a pleasure, as always. I hope the listeners, viewers will get a lot out of it and get some more feedback and questions. And I really look forward to continuing this journey with you.
Happily. And this is just the introduction.
And this is just the introduction.
So we have a deal.
Thank you, Eylam.
It was wonderful.